greetings and prepare to delve into the crypt. For today we're showcasing all things buried with a look at 5 new dungeon mods from Morrowind that touch upon the tombs, barrows and sepulchral lairs in the lands of the Dunmer. Morrowind is, as you know, a land rife with burial grounds and catacombs of all sorts, populating every region outside nearly every city, covering every corner of Ardenfell. These howling halls of the undead are Morrowind's most ubiquitous dungeon type, with over 92 in the vanilla game, and even more found in the expansions of Tribunal and Blood Moon. As one of the most common dungeon delves in Morrowind, the ancestral tombs and barrows are often a target for modders to improve, as they are, without question, often some of the dullest dungeons you'll come across. Indeed, some of them are just little more than a single room. And so today, we'll be taking a look at 5, or, well, maybe a bit more like 8 or 9, I should say, dungeon mods overhauling the crypts, tombs, catacombs, and barrows of Morrowind. Now, this video is paying mostly to new releases, and all these mods are, of course, compatible with the biggest tomb overhaul mod out there, Tombs and Towers, which we won't be showing off here, but suffice to say, it is the best mod in this category, covering some 15 of the game's 92 ancestral tombs. And really, you should already be using it. But anyway, because all the mods here that we'll be showcasing overhaul vanilla tombs and barrows, we'll be showing off comparison shots of each mod, showing what the tomb looked like in the vanilla game, and what it looks like with each mod. This will hopefully give you just a good idea of how far the changes go. But in every case, I think you'll find the modded version to be just vastly superior to the vanilla game. Now, with all that said, as always, timestamps are just right down below, along with a link for each mod and a link to our graphics mod list. So with all that said, let's begin with our first jaunt into the crypts of Morrowind, with the Woe of Indalen Tomb by Morgond. Released for the 2024 Morrowind Modathon, the Woe of Indalen Tomb overhauls and expands the ancestral tomb found just outside of Caldera. And not just giving it an entirely new look, with new undead foes for you to face, but also adding a new quest, directly linked to one of the residents in town. This quest begins when you hear rumours about a resident's restless nights. She's been plagued by terrible dreams, seemingly emanating from the Indalen ancestral tomb. And should you agree, you'll be asked to investigate and uncover whatever nefarious thing is defiling this crypt. Now, I won't spoil the quest. Suffice to say, it's short and sweet, and the end result is a new player home. A small lot apartment in Caldera. Nothing fancy, but, you know, it's a place to hang your hat and store your equipment. Focusing on the actual dungeon though, the Woe of Indalen Tomb is a detailed and atmospheric makeover of this once-dull crypt, providing a very moderate expansion to this ancestral tomb, with new areas that embrace just a wee bit of verticality, and multi-level design to make for just a far more interesting experience than, well, you know, the typical dull copy and pasted corridors and chambers that so often plague Velothi tombs. I especially love the central hall, with those gorgeous sunbeams reaching down from the grated ceiling. The atmosphere, and yes, verticality here is just, mwah, chef's kiss. The overhauled tomb itself, though, still isn't that large. While it does use vertical space to excellent effect, It's pretty comparable in size to most other ancestral tombs in Vanilla Morrowind. Just, obviously, with a far more detailed appearance, and also just a tad more loot, and more enemies for you to face. As a comparison, you can see the vanilla ancestral tomb just right here. And right away, you should see some pretty clear similarities between the layout of the WoW Indalen tomb and the vanilla Indalen tomb. The vanilla tomb opens with a corridor that branches between a side room with a lectern and a stairwell that leads down to a central chamber, with one locked final chamber beyond, and one additional side chamber. The WoW Indalen tomb has largely preserved this layout, but obviously just made it a lot more distinct, with a couple of new rooms added, and again, it is worth noting that the vanilla tombs do have a very, very copy and paste design. If you've played Morrowind for any length of time, the rooms of the vanilla Indalen tomb will just look awfully similar to a lot of other tombs across Vvardenfell. Indeed, I know for a fact that the final chamber of the vanilla Indalen tomb was also used for the Serethi ancestral tomb, up in the Shogorad region. So not only is the WoW Indalen tomb just a clear improvement, it does make an effort to keep a vanilla-ish layout, just without that copy and paste feel. Next though, we're jumping from the ancestral tombs of Vvardenfell to the Nordic Barrows of Solstheim. For our next mod is the Stone Halls of Solstheim, reforged by Nalfragos77. The biggest mod in today's video, the Stone Halls of Solstheim covers not one, but 3 of Solstheim's Nordic Barrows, completely rebuilding and vastly expanding each one into a proper dungeon, more in line with the Nordic Barrows that you can find in Skyrim than, those previously found on Solstheim. This project has been in development for quite some time, with the first iteration released 6 years ago in 2018, initially covering the Bloodskull Barrow. And that first release was later remastered to use updated versions of OBE and Tamriel data in 2021. While the ultimate goal of the Stone Halls of Solstheim is to eventually overhaul and replace all the Nordic Barrows on Solstheim, as of 2024, this mod only covers 3 of those catacombs, specifically the Bloodskull Barrow, the Frostlemain Barrow, and the Jolgaer Barrow. And development is, still ongoing, and the project will likely see more updates in the future. But in the meantime, let's take a look at each of these barrows, starting with the Bloodskull Barrow. Found a wee ways north of Raven Rock, the vanilla Bloodskull Barrow was a rather tiny dungeon, composed of a standard square hallway entrance that leads into a single burial chamber. The entire thing can be explored in less than a minute. In fact, you could probably speedrun it in about 10 seconds. And as we'll see here in a second, it shares the same layout as a lot of other Nordic Barrows on Solstheim, giving it a very copy and pasted feel. Now, let's take a look at the new version of the Bloodskull Barrow, for the Stone Halls of Solstheim has completely rebuilt this burial tomb, ditching the old, dull, and forgettable layout from before, and massively expanding this dungeon to about, maybe 5 or 6 times the original size? Possibly more than that, honestly. It's a bit hard to say, but suffice to say it'll take more than a minute to actually explore it. One of the first things you'll note here is a stark contrast in detailing. From the bland, rather unadorned halls from before, to passageways covered in cobwebs, roots and ferns sticking out of the walls, fungal growths and spiders' nests, boulders and detritus lining the halls. There is no question the atmosphere here just fully captures that sense of delving deep into the ground, that foreboding of delving into a place where the living are not meant to linger, into a forgotten and forsaken burial site, where creepy crawlies doubtless lurk in the dark. But there's some more warmly lit areas as well, with candles and broken urns and ancient mummified corpses standing at the ready. And these catacombs, far from being a linear affair, have many twists and turns, blocked passageways, hidden halls, and cavernous chambers besides, containing all sorts of new discoveries, from ancient shrines to piles of treasure, and dangers waiting to be disturbed. Compared to the original dungeon, this is a proper adventure, and it's only the first, for next we'll jump to the Frostlmane Barrow, found just to the east of Fort Frostmoth, near the southern edge of the Igma River. And here you'll see what I mean by the copy and paste nature of the Nordic barrows of Solstheim. For the vanilla Frostlmane Barrow has the exact same layout as the Bloodskull Barrow, and outside of a few different pieces of clutter, the two barrows are practically identical in the vanilla game. Not so anymore with Stonehalls of Solstheim, for you can see the new and improved Frostlmane Barrow here, and just look at the world of difference. The original barrow was quite a barren affair, but the new Frostlmane Barrow actually has a bit of character, a bit of environmental storytelling. You can see from the opening chambers that this barrow is inhabited, at least in part, by bandits, who have apparently just taken refuge in this decrepit crypt, with scaffolding and mining picks indicating that maybe these fiends have dug into this barrow in search of some lost treasure. And like with the Bloodskull Barrow, this new Frostlmane makeover is vastly larger than its vanilla counterpart, providing a number of chambers for you to explore and fight through as you delve through these ruinous halls in search of whatever mysteries lurk in the depths below. And it is a positively beautifully atmospheric environment to explore, gorgeously detailed and realised. But moving on to the last of these barrows, we have the Jolgaer Barrow, an originally quite small barrow found in northern Solstheim, west of the Skull Village. In Vanilla Morrowind, this barrow was the home of the fabled Snow Prince, the burial site of the last of the Falmer on Solstheim. But it was, unfortunately, just a rather disappointing experience in the vanilla game. For what should have been a grand barrow was instead a simple one-room tomb, with naught else to see beyond the central chamber. To say it was underwhelming is an understatement. That utterly disappointing burial crypt is no more, for the Stonehalls of Solstheim does this barrow proper justice, with an atmospheric set of caverns that lead into earthen chambers, seemingly recently excavated, revealing ancient and forgotten burial halls, urns, trinkets, and offerings. Ancient coins twinkling in the candlelight, promising treasures. But this is only the surface, for the true chambers of the Snow Prince are hidden, and you'll have to carefully search in order to reveal them. Needless to say, the Stonehalls of Solstheim is a vast improvement over the vanilla game in just every way. In terms of atmosphere, environmental design, storytelling, it is a notch above what you could find before. And of course, it's also compatible with Solstheim Tomb of the Snow Prince. I would highly recommend it, and personally, I can't wait to see even more updates for this project in the future. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on to our next mod, Vinen's Hlaalu Tomb Overhaul by Vinen. If you've watched any of our previous dungeon videos, Vinen should already be a familiar name, for Vinin has released a series of cavern overhauls, giving a variety of Morrowind's vanilla caves and caverns the updated treatment. And now, Vinin has moved on to Ancestral Tombs. And this is actually the first of a trio of tomb overhauls that Vinin has released in 2024. Like with Vinin's previous overhauls, and like with the Woe of Indalen Tomb, each of these tomb overhauls, as we'll see, aims to preserve elements of the vanilla dungeon layout, while just lightly expanding it, and of course adding more detail, verticality, and unique encounters. You can see the vanilla Hlaalu Ancestral Tomb just right here, and it's a relatively small crypt. The primary feature here is a long corridor with a handful of side chambers with ash pits off to the side, and one larger chamber just at the end with a stairwell and a traditional elevated ash pit in the center. Compare that to Vinin's remake of the Hlaalu Ancestral Tomb. You can see the layout is mostly the same, to a degree. Only now that long corridor has just a bit more detailing, with alcoves and the occasional bits of rubble, and the side chambers are, visually, just far more exciting. Looking out upon a cavern in the background, a submerged, subterranean extension of these Velothi crypts. In parts overgrown and ruined, this renewed Hlaalu Ancestral Tomb is a far more exciting encounter. But, it still isn't a massive dungeon by any means. It's only seen a light expansion. But one that makes this dungeon just a unique and distinct location from the dozens of other ancestral tombs across Morrowind. Going on to another mod by Vinin, we have Vinin's Hlurvi Tomb Overhaul. In Vanilla Morrowind, the Hlurvi Ancestral Tomb was a very short dungeon located just north of Sadrith Mora, which, as you can see here, consisted largely of a single corridor with one ash pit, and that's it. There's no side chambers, only 2 undead, and really not much in the way of loot, which is kind of, fairly typical of just a lot of tombs in the vanilla game. Now, unlike Vinin's overhauls for the Hlaalu Ancestral Tomb, Vinin's Hlurvi overhaul just completely gets rid of the original layout, seeing as there really wasn't much of a layout really to begin with. Instead, this new Hlurvi tomb can be divided into 3 parts. A series of ramps with the occasional side chamber of ash pits and Velothi altars that descend down into a large central hall. A sepulchre with piles of bones and high ceilings, lending an air of verticality to an interior that previously had none at all. The final chamber is the lair of some sort of a Telvanni wizard or necromancer, with a small living quarters, and while this is still, a rather short dungeon, like with Vinin's Hlaalu Tomb Overhaul, it is vastly more interesting than what was here in the vanilla game. Taking a look at just one more mod by Vinin, our next stop is the Lalaran Ancestral Tomb. And in Vanilla Morrowind, this was another small to mid-sized tomb without a huge amount to see, located between Pelesiad and Balmora, just north of Sedanin. It has a typical double hallway with a pitfall trap, a stairwell and lower chamber, and an upper chamber. But, it's still just a pretty short dungeon with only about 3 undead, and not a huge amount in way of loot, like most of these dungeons. It can be completed in just a little over a minute. Perhaps a tad more if you get stuck with a lock, but, point is, it's a pretty quick and easy dungeon roll. Now, switching to Vinin's overhaul, this new Lalaran tomb does keep the same basic layout, but with a few notable differences. The pit trap that previously would have dropped you down to another section of this Velothi Ancestral Tomb, now, instead, falls into a dark subterranean cavern, lit only by the occasional torch scorn and the somewhat ominous purple glow of a few veins of raw ebony ore, pulsating under these dark cavern waters. This atmospheric cavern leads right back into the ancestral tomb proper, with a path leading up into the tomb's chambers, now with just a more ruinous detailing. Overturned below the altars, roots shooting through the walls, the new Laran tomb has a more overgrown feeling, an ancient burial site that has been ravaged by the passage of time. That's the last of our trio of Vinland Tomb overhauls, and I think you'll agree, they do just a fantastic balancing job of maintaining the original vanilla layout while still making each tomb feel unique. But moving on, we have another trio of tomb overhauls, this time by... oh no. Why does this always happen to me? Okay, I can't believe I have to say this. By Big Baloney Balls. Worst of all, 9 Divines. Some of these usernames are just truly a pain. I mean, what is this? An old account of Jackamoffs? But anyway, the first of these overhauls is the Lurvu Ancestral Tomb expanded by... you know what? I'm just going to call them BBBZ in order to preserve my sanity, which I've already lost quite a bit of, thank you very much. I don't need any more help in that department. Right. One of the ancestral tombs found in the West Gash between Nissus and Alvalothi, the Lurvu Ancestral Tomb has the dubious distinction of being Morrowind's smallest dungeon. The tomb is literally only 2 rooms, heavily lacking any sort of detail or decoration, with only 2 urns in the entire place. You could clear it out in about 5 seconds. Now, I must confess, the Lurvu Ancestral Tomb has long been one of the dungeons that I've most wanted to see an overhaul and expansion for, just due to the sheer absurdity of its tiny scale in the vanilla game. I mean, you know the really absurd thing? The Lurvu family is one of the biggest families in vanilla Morrowind. They have like 16 members. I don't think there's even a bigger family in the vanilla game. Like the Lurvu is the biggest, but they have the tiniest tomb. Like, how does that make any kind of sense? And here, BBBZ has delivered a, if not necessarily a massive expansion, at least one that brings this dungeon up to par with the other tombs in the vanilla game, with enough content to actually justify an excursion. As you can see here, this mod expands the Lurvu Ancestral Tomb considerably, with a handful of new short and ruinous side chambers, nicely detailed and cluttered, and an opening to a new cavern that leads down to a forgotten shrine and something of a mini-boss for those who venture through the catacombs. It is still a short dungeon, but the detailing, the atmosphere, and scale are just certainly an improvement over the utterly lackluster and uninspiring vanilla tomb that was here before. Next, we have the Saran Ancestral Tomb Overhaul by BBBZ. And much like the tomb we just saw, the Saran Ancestral Tomb in vanilla Morrowind is incredibly small. Perhaps not as comically tiny as the Lurvu Ancestral Tomb, but, it's still like a 10-second dungeon romp. You could, get through this just awfully quickly. The vanilla tomb, as you can see here, is composed of a single larger chamber with a handful of ash pits. And much like the Lurvu Ancestral Tomb, there's just a dearth of detailing and finishing here. Fast forward to the modded update by BBBZ, and obviously, this expands the Saran Ancestral Tomb. No longer is it a single chamber dungeon, but rather one with side passages and chambers that go beyond the confines of the vanilla tomb. Though, again, like with the Lurvu Ancestral Tomb, this is not a massive expansion. At the end of the day, this is still a fairly short dungeon that you could probably complete in a few minutes. But at least now it's a bit more comparable with other tombs, and provides more content than a simple 10-second dungeon raid. The atmosphere here is also just a really superb improvement. There's lots of new clutter and detailing, utilizing the amazing assets from Tamriel and OBData, with new furnishings and more ruinous elements to capture that burial ground feel. And the choice of lighting here is excellent. But let's move on to our final mod here, Clinton Hall Barrow Overhaul by BBZ. This is the smallest mod in today's lineup, and also the smallest Nordic Barrow on Solstheim. Unlike the other mods by BBZ, this one doesn't seek to expand the original layout. The vanilla barrow, as you can see here, is kept as the blueprint for just a very slight overhaul of this burial treasure vault. Instead, this mod focuses on changing the loot and clutter within this barrow to more accurately reflect Nordic culture, using assets from Tamriel data. That means Nordic urns, Nordic coins instead of generic gold, Nordic weapons and armor, Nordic bottles and potions, and just other assets that bring this barrow just more in line with the aesthetics of Nordic locations in places like Skyrim, Home of the Nords. And yes, this is both compatible with Solstheim, Tomb of the Snow Prince, and the Stone Halls of Solstheim, though that last one might change in the future. Either way, it is still just a nice little improvement on the vanilla game. But that's the last of our tomb and barrow overhauls. I hope you found this video to be useful, and I do hope you'll check these mods out. They are all excellent improvements on the vanilla game. Now, we might do a few more videos in this series, just covering other dungeon overhauls. Devil knows there's a lot of them. So stay tuned for potentially future episodes on Daedric Shrines, Caves and Caverns, Dunmer Strongholds, and just all the rest. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and as always, links are just right down below. Now, real quick, I would just like to take a moment to thank our patrons, including Acidic JMac, Alexos, Area 5, /Symbol Mean, Billy Fighter, Cotta Canterbury, Kiwi, Cyprinius, Danae, Daliant, Danina, Dennis418, Exavian, Yame Alcazo Castornau, Julian, Corridor, Langasteer, Lord Brinny, Macbone, Melchior Dog, Moolord, Michael, Mr. the Joshman, Not Cascade, Old Navy Twidget, Opera Jag, or Mr. Bard, Porcu, Hovio Holo, Raven Talon, Arfuso, Rissley, Sand Gentleman, Shadowban Schwein, Shooter, Soka Cat, Stiff Kitten, Telvani with 8,000 nicknames, Tezrel, Tutarin Traumaroot, Tyra Rain, Voot-Tot, and Xero Fox. If you'd like to join them, check out our rewards, including early access, behind-the-scenes content, and access to polls to, decide what kind of content we showcase. Visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/MorrowandModding. Again, thanks for watching, and as always, stay safe, stay healthy, happy modding, and I'll see you all next time.